See where it all goes on schedule. Imagine itself on. And I don't know if all kids.
We just keep that door closed so that we can tape it.
These are terrible tips. Oh no. That would be good. And then one student over there calls the janitor. They come. They're like, "Bye."
Okay, Brandon, we're going to do listening now. Okay?
Yep, now's listening time. All right, welcome. Thank you, everybody, for attending the Pizza, Popcorn, and Protest, our first annual event like this. We plan on doing this maybe once a year. What happens is right around the first week of April, all the appraisal notices go out. This year, they're running a little bit behind in Bexar County, so you probably haven't gotten yours yet, but pay attention. Probably in the next week, you're going to get an appraisal notice from the county with your new proposed value. So what we're here to talk about today is a little bit about the things you can do to keep those values down and save yourself money year over year. That's okay. If you have any questions and you're watching this live on Teams, feel free to type them in the chat box. We do have some questions that have already come in that we'll be reading off here in a little bit. So feel free to do that, and as we kind of get through them, we'll pull them off of Teams and read through your questions. So if you got anything, just punch it on in. If you don't have Teams and you're doing it just through your phone or through a web app that you're not familiar with the process, just text them to me if you've got my information, or if you have Dee's information, she's here too. Just send us a text and we'll go from there. So let me start off a little bit about who we are, why we're here for Internet Land out there. My name is Matthew Driffel, and I'm a real estate agent on the D. Driffel Group, and we are here at our Coldwell Banker Deanne Harper office. Today's April 8th. It's in the evening after the eclipse, so if any of you all got to see the eclipse today, good for you. It was very cloudy here. We just got to see it get dark and then get real light again. So we'll have to wait another 600 years for another opportunity, I guess. We brought a special guest here today. His name is Ryan Cohen. He's an attorney, and he does nothing but property tax protesting. In fact, he runs a website, protesttax.com. I've been using Ryan for years as I started my own real estate investing journey and buying properties. I had one year where, I submitted my stuff to the county. I was trying to protest it myself, and somehow I missed a notice, or they didn't mail it to me, or whatever happened. I missed my deadline. I lost my opportunity to protest, and my appraised value went up like $80,000 on that particular property. It was a lot, and it was a shock. And in Bexar County, where we're at, in the city limits of San Antonio, you're getting taxed like 2.9%. So you can do the math on 2.9% of $80,000. It's not an insignificant amount of money. And so the next year I was like, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to mess around. I found Ryan. I've been using him personally for 4 or 5 years. And so I did want to do a brief introduction and then let him go and talk a little bit about the process of protesting taxes. And then if you have any questions, I'll be monitoring the chat as well as my text messenger. Send those questions on over and we'll be happy to answer them. Cool.
All right, you'll control the slideshow.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, thanks for the introduction, Matthew. As he said, my name is Ryan Cohen. I am an attorney here in San Antonio. I've got an office downtown. I don't have my address on there, but I do have my website address, protesttax.com. Our office is in downtown on Travis Street. I am an attorney here in San Antonio, but I do my protest through my company, Protest Tax LLC, which retains my law firm to hire to represent individuals at the protest hearings. As Matthew mentioned, the notice of appraised values usually do come out at the first week of April. Today's April 8th. I was told that they will come out this Thursday, so that would be April 11th. And so I would say if you're watching this right now, by the end of the week, you should get something in your mail. So I'm going to teach you about protesting property taxes, which is protesting the appraised values of the property to get the taxes down as low as possible. So a little more introduction about myself. I'm from San Antonio. I was born here. I attended Clark High School. I graduated from UTSA in 2012, and then I went to Texas A&M School of Law in Fort Worth. Like I said, my legal practice is here in San Antonio. Besides that, I'm also an investor in the new San Antonio Missions baseball team. Opening day is tomorrow, so if y'all have no plans, and hopefully the rain doesn't delay opening day, but we are excited to start the new season tomorrow. And a quick disclaimer, although I'm an attorney, this is not legal advice. Most of the information I present today can be found in a few places: the Texas Constitution, the Texas Property Code, Tax Code, or the Comptroller's Office. So I'll run through this. I know I don't want to torture anybody with a PowerPoint. Most of the time, the benefit of me being here is to give you a brief overview of protest and property values. And if you have any questions, as Matthew said, we'll answer those at the end of the presentation. So property taxes, right? Nobody likes to talk about them, but let's do it. Texas has no state property tax, and there's no state income tax. So when I say by no state property tax, when you get your tax bill and it has all of the taxing entities on it, there's not a line item that says state of Texas. As Matthew mentioned, there's a city of San Antonio tax rate, there's the Bexar County, there's the school district, there's the roads, but that's how we pay for everything, right? The local government set the tax rates, and that's how we pay for the schools, streets, road, police, fire, protection, and many other services, all through property taxes. Texas law requires that property values are uniform and equal, and that's the main goal for my job, is to make sure that you're not paying more than you should be for your property taxes, that everything is uniform and equal. All right, we'll go to the next slide. So just want to go quickly over the Texas calendar phases. January 1st through May 15th is the appraisal phase. That's when the appraisal district is going out to the field and appraising your property. Taking a look at any new improvements on the property, any new builds, determining what value they're going to place on your property. They'll send those notices, usually April through May 1st, notices of appraised values are being sent out to the property owners. And then May 15th is the deadline to file a protest. And so after May 15th begins the equalization phase. That's when myself, or if you do it by yourself, that's when you would go to the appraisal district or speak with a representative and make sure that your appraised value is uniform and equal. Once your value is final at a protest hearing, that's when the appraisal district provides the values to the tax assessor's office, and then tax bills begin to be sent out in October. And then the collection phase is when the taxes are collected at the end of the year. So it is a kind of backwards process. We are protesting your value right now for the tax bill that comes in at the end. How does the appraisal district appraise your property? Well, there's three ways: the market, which sales comparison approach, the income approach, and the cost approach. The market data sales approach is for single family homes. That's the most common approach that the district uses. They're looking at what the market sales are. Although they are not supposed to use MLS sales, they do have a third-party vendor that they are able to get recent sales from. So most importantly, taxable property is to be appraised at market value as of January 1st. So that's a good point of information if you're going to protest yourself. Let's say you build a pool and that's not done until February. And then the district goes and adds the pool for this tax year. Well, you want to let them know, well, hey, appraisal district actually didn't have a pool on January 1st. This is the condition of my property as of January 1st. So January 1st is the date that you want to target as far as evidence goes and what your value should be. Let's go back, if you don't mind. Let's actually go back. I just want a couple more points on that. So market value, what is market value? Well, if it's exposed to the sale in the open market, and so that usually means the MLS. So if you buy a property through an agent, through the MLS, that's considered a market transaction. Recently, we've had a lot of recent purchases that are off market. If you have a private MLS sale or you're just buying a property from your neighbor, they may not consider that open market. So the sales price may not be as material to them as it would be if it was an MLS sale. That doesn't mean you can't get that value at a protest hearing. It just means that you're going to have to fight a little bit harder and say that that was a true market sale, because both the seller and the purchaser know of the use and what it's capable for, and they agree to a value. So the income approach is used for properties that are producing income, such as apartment complexes, strip center, anything that generates income. The appraisal district will use an income approach. And then lastly, the cost approach is for properties that don't fall into the market approach or the income approach. It's how much would it cost to replace the building? So sometimes we'll see that cost approach. you can use either one in your hearing, but again, for single family homes, you're going to be mostly doing the market sales comparison first. And for that, that's where real estate agents can come in. If you do it yourself and you have a realtor friend like Matthew and you want to get some comps for your hearing, that's what they're able to provide you with. So this is a notice of appraised value. This was actually my notice of appraised value for 2023. And on the back of the notice of appraised value is the notice of protest form. So we'll look at this real quick to kind of see what's on here. Again, this is the 2023 notice of appraised value. You actually see the date of this notice was April 3rd, 2023. So last year values came out on April 3rd. I was told that they were going to come out on April 3rd this year, but it seems like they're still kind of working on a few issues to get those out. So on the notice of appraised value, you'll see a few key pieces of information. Near the top, you'll see that there's an e-file pin. If you do want to file a protest yourself for your homestead property, you can do so through the district's website, and you'll use that pin that is provided to you on your notice to do so. Secondly, there'll be two columns, last year's value and what the proposed 2023 value is. Last year's value for my property was $268,000, and that's under the line total market value. This notice of appraised value is a little misleading, and I've asked the district to change it a couple times, but they still haven't done so. And when I say it's a little misleading, it's because there's another line that says appraised value, and it's in bold. And so when you see that notice of appraised value, the first thing you think is, oh, they're appraising my property at whatever the bold value is. Well, actually, they're appraising your value at the total market value. The appraised value, this should really say assessed value. The total market value is the appraised value. The assessed value is the bold number. And the difference why you may have a different appraised value versus assessed value is if you have any exemptions in place. For example, in 2022, I have an HS, which is a homestead exemption. So my assessed value was less than what my appraised value was by, I think that's $258,600, and my appraised value is $268,000. So when I protested this property in 2022 and I got a value of $268,000, I was still actually being taxed at a lesser amount of $258,600. And so one important note on this, when they proposed my market value last year of $315,330, it could only increase my assessed value by 10%, and that's that homestead exemption rule. Right? The homestead exemption, it creates a partial exemption, but it creates that homestead cap, which means the appraised value can jump whatever they want. They could have put $1 million on my property, but the assessed value, what I was actually getting taxed on, was only going to go up by 10%. And so if you do the math, this bold number, $284,350, is exactly 10% more than the previous year's assessed value. So if you see your notice of appraised value and you want to know what you're actually getting taxed on, look at the bold number. It should say assessed value, but then look at the market value, because that's what the district is actually appraising your property at. And so even though I got my value down in 2022 to 268, I was still paying less. Well, what ended up happening was my value went from 268 to 315. So my value went up by almost $50,000. And so that allowed me to have a better argument to get my 2023 value lower. And I got it lower less than what it was capped at. So we actually saw some true tax savings. Besides this, the notice of appraised value, near the bottom, you'll see the deadline for filing a protest is May 15th for this notice. And then it tells you when the ARB will begin hearings. Two more notes on this notice of appraised value. If you've been keeping track of your notices in the past years, you'll see it used to say what your estimated taxes were. It doesn't show that anymore for a couple reasons. One, the value changes if you protest it, and two, the tax rates that are adopted at the end of the year, those change as well. So it was a little misleading to have what the estimated tax savings were, and so they just did away with that because those were never accurate. Secondly, and I think we'll talk about this in a slide, the notice of appraised value, the protest deadline is always May 15th or 30 days after the notice of appraised value is mailed out. So because the district last year sent them by April 3rd, the May 15th deadline was still in place. Let's assume that the district doesn't mail out your appraisal notice until April 30th, right? You'll have 30 days from that date to file a protest. So the deadline will be extended till May 30th or whatever 30 days is after that notice letter. So moving on to the back side of the notice of appraised value is the notice of protest form. Run through this real quick. Every district is kind of different about what their notice of protest looks like. Few key pieces of information, at least for the Bexar County notice. You'll see there's a couple items that are already in red. Two most important things is you want to check off, if you do file a protest, the evidence that you requested. You want to get the evidence. And then ask if you want an informal conference. And yes, you do want to check that box off because you do want to have an informal conference with the appraiser. Check those two boxes off. Fill out section 1 and 2 about your property owner and a property description. And then in a reason for protest, you have to make sure you check off the first box, which is incorrect appraised value or value unequal with others. There are other reasons to protest, but the main argument, the one that 99.9% of the reason you're at a protest is incorrect appraised value or market value. If you want to do some additional facts to help the appraiser understand why you're protesting, you can put that here. You don't have to. And then this section is for the appraisal review board. And that's if you do go to appraisal review board, which is after the informal hearing. If you can't settle informally, you'll be scheduled for a formal hearing. Then you can check if you want to be in person, by Zoom, if you want a regular panel or single panel. I suggest doing a regular panel, which is a 3-member panel, and appearing in person. It's good to go down to the district and actually talk with these people in front of one another. But you can choose whatever you like to do. And then you'll sign it. You don't need to worry about section 5. That's for properties over, I believe, 57 million. Hopefully you don't. But that's the notice of protest form for Bexar County. So in summary, real quick, your notice of appraised value on the back of it will be the notice of protest form. Make sure you get that filled out and sent over to the district, or if it is your homestead, you can file electronically. So, right here. So a property owner must file a notice of protest in writing or electronically if it's their homestead. And you just, you can use the district's forms, but you're not required to. You just have to identify the property owner and the reason why you are protesting. Again, the property owner, you've got to file that by May 15th or no later than 30 days after the date of appraisal district was noticed. For my firm, sometimes we send a list, an Excel list or a PDF list with hundreds of properties. And I say, here you go, Comal Appraisal District. Here is a PDF of every property that I'm protesting this year. I'm not filling out a notice of protest form for every single property. So you can do the same, whatever you like, as long as you give the district notice that you are protesting and why you're protesting, again, incorrect market or appraised value, then you'll be all set and they'll schedule you for an informal and formal hearing. Okay, again, we'll just touch base. The incorrect appraised value or value unequal with others, you want to make sure you do select that option so you can go ahead and hear those protests. If you don't, they used to separate the two out. It used to be an incorrect appraised value and then value unequal with others. Sometimes if you just selected one of the options, you can only hear that option in a protest hearing. But fortunately, they have combined them together. So now you can hear both the incorrect, which is the market value, and the value unequal with others, which is the equity argument. So there's a market argument and an equity argument in play. If you do apply for a homestead or any other exemption and you are denied an exemption, you can always argue that as well. Pretty rare, but sometimes you will run into that. And then there's a few other reasons to protest. But again, the main one is that incorrect appraisal value or value unequal with others. So we'll talk about that real quick. The market and equity approach. When you do file a protest, again, the goal at a protest hearing is to get that market value down as low as possible. The way to do that, if it's a residential property, you want to provide sales data. You want to look, you want to provide sales that are material to the district. And for 2024 purposes, the material sales will be any sale that occurred in 2023 or the first quarter of 2024. The property code does allow Bexar County, given the population size, to look back 36 months for comparable sales. And so, you know, you could bring a sale that occurred at the end of 2022 and argue the property code, but a lot of the times that will not be considered material, especially the way the market's been going lately, kind of mostly up, a little down the past year, but you want to look at sales within that time frame. So again, for 2024 purposes, it would be January 1st, 2023 to March 30th, 2024. Also for residential properties, providing personal evidence is very important, especially here in Bear County. The most common evidence that we provide to the district are from property owners that are photos of the property. If you have any damage to the property, if you have any estimates for repair, electrical issues, plumbing, if it backs to commercial property, any big ticket items, if your roof got hail damage recently, you want to make sure you provide that. Sometimes we'll even get insurance claims and quotes from them. If you don't have a residential property and it's a commercial property, again, if it's an income approach, you want to provide T12s, which are reports of income and expenses over the last 12 months. You want to provide vacancy rates, show rent rolls. And so for properties that I protest that are commercial properties, apartment complexes, it's a little more involved as far as financials go, because what the district is doing is they're basing those properties on an income worksheet. So they're estimating what the cap rates are, what your NOI is, what your vacancy rates are. And so we got to actually show them what they are, and we'll make those adjustments and hopefully get that loan.
So for a regular homeowner, they just give you, you just do line items, just a list of all the things that are going on with their property?
So if it's a residential property, not an income approach, just a single family home, it's considered a market approach. And so they'll appraise your property, and the way they determine your value is they'll use sales, and they'll be like, okay, your property, here's 5 homes that sold in your neighborhood. We'll make adjustments for square footage, for condition, depreciation, and then they'll spit out a number.
And so when we're submitting it though, we just like line item the things that you're talking about, damages and things.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, providing photos, just here's some photos. I know, don't go to Walgreens and print out photos. I know some people do that and hand them to me, that's fine. And you can do that. You can go to the protest hearing yourself and they'll scan those into you. But yeah, exactly. You want to photos showing cracks on your foundation, interior, exterior cracks. If you have water damage, a lot of times we have water damage issue photos. If you have any flooding issues, roof issues are pretty popular as well. Any big ticket item that you can imagine, just go around your property, take the 10 best photos that you have that show, hey, my property is in need of some repair. Then submit those along with, if you have quotes for those repairs, then that is great evidence. So if you don't have the sales data, the comps, even just providing photos of your property is going to help the district reduce your value.
And what about if like the next door neighbor is a dump?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we're talking about your property,
Right.
but I do have, of course, the neighbor. I have the photos from the back porch showing the yard of just junk, right? So that can be helpful because it kind of shows the condition of the neighborhood, and every property is different. They're supposed to take in the views of the property. So if you're looking at the dump the whole time, that might be, helpful what you're hearing. But I wouldn't worry about what's going on down the street unless, you're backing to a green belt that is now being developed into an apartment complex. That's something that can absolutely reduce your appraised value.
Okay.
Cool. So kind of on this one, so
Yeah.
sales data,
Mm-hmm.
that's something if people watching internet land want to reach out to somebody on the D-Driffle group, we can provide that. I had one client last year, got his appraisal and they appraised his home at $410,000. I went and pulled 24 months of sales data. There'd never been a home in his neighborhood that sold for more than 300. But there've been a bunch of new builds within a half mile that they were comparing a dissimilar product to his 30-year-old home. And so just pulling that sales data, I gave him the packet, he went in, it was very successful fighting his own taxes
Yeah.
in that circumstance just because of the sales data. And then that personal evidence, that's something that the homeowner will need to take their cell phone, get some photos. If they have a quote to repair a foundation issue or something, they can put that together and take it to the appraisal district if they choose to do it on their own. Now, what if they're using you, Ryan, and they're calling you for this stuff?
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
But just to touch base on that, and that's why it's important on that notice of protest form that you do check off that evidence requested, because then you can actually see what home sales they're looking at to compare to your property. So, as Matthew mentioned, if you get your evidence packet and you're like, why are they comparing my home to all of these new builds down the road? That's a really good argument, right? And sometimes they'll do that if there's not a home that's sold in your immediate neighborhood. because the district does place different neighborhood codes depending on what your neighborhood is. And that'd be great if they would only use sales that happen in your neighborhood. But not saying a lot of times, sometimes they don't. And so, that's great for us at a protest hearing. I'm like, well, if we look at the neighborhood codes, these are all outside of the subject property's neighborhood. These are all new builds. So that's a great argument for us. So it's important that we do check the evidence requested box to see what homes they are comparing. And then for the personal evidence, yes, if you do hire a firm, like my firm, we do send a questionnaire that you fill out, and we do, if you check the boxes off or any issues for your property, we ask that you provide photos or quotes to us. So every day we get photos from our property owners. We have a text, if you need to text us the photos or email them to us, it's really easy to get any evidence you want over to us. So we talked about the residential approach, the income approach. The last one that we didn't talk about was the cost approach. If it's a new build, you want to provide what the cost was for the new build. And that's the only time you would provide a cost approach, or provide evidence for what the construction was if you want to argue the cost. And sometimes that is good, even for single family homes. If you just built it, provide the builder's contract. Show what the costs were for the build, and hopefully they're less than what the appraisal district has for you.
Property,
Yeah.
in the years being appraised, and you do buy it under market.
Yep.
How long will they use that HUD information?
Yeah.
Like if you purchased it well below the market, how long will they?
Yeah, so they consider a material sale. So for 2024 purposes, January 1st, 2023 up through the first quarter of 2024. So if you built a home anytime last year, they would consider that material. And we'll use that for the hearing for this year. Next year in 2025, if I'm providing a sales from 2023, it's not as material, but you could just say, hey, I just bought it 2 years ago. Why is it increasing 50%? So we can always make that argument that it is valid for 1 to 2 years, but the district's purposes, they'll honor a sales or a new build cost if it's within the last 12 months, essentially. So I know we talked about this all through the presentation, but just to kind of, if you're like, what is Ryan even talking about? So the informal formal hearings and then arbitration and lawsuits. So let's run through the protest process real quick. You get your notice of appraised value in the mail. You fill out the notice of protest. You file a protest. Hopefully you checked off the box for informal hearing. What that does is it gives you the first bite at the apple, which is the informal hearing. You are going to be scheduled one-on-one with an appraiser to talk about your property, and hopefully you can resolve it at that time. Pre-COVID, we would actually go to the appraisal district and you'd wait in line, and whatever appraiser was next, okay, you're up next with appraiser Joe. And you would talk, you'd bring your evidence, you'd bring your photos, you'd bring your comps, and you'd go back and forth, and hopefully you agree with the value. If you don't agree to a value at the informal hearing, you'll be scheduled for a formal hearing, usually 2 weeks afterwards. At the formal hearing, it's not intimidating at all. And I encourage you, if you've never protested yourself, at least try it one time. At a formal hearing, you have to show up. Again, you can check off to either be in person or by Zoom. But instead of working with an appraiser one-on-one to come to a value, it's really you versus an appraiser, and you're making your argument in front of 3 members of your neighborhood. They are considered the appraisal review board. There's probably, I don't know, maybe 50 to 60 appraisal review board members here in Bexar County alone. So there's maybe 5 or 6 panels running every day. And so if you have multiple formal hearings on different days, you are probably not going to be in front of the same group every single time. But how it works is it's a 15-minute hearing. You'll have the opportunity to present your evidence. The appraiser will present their evidence. And then the appraisal review board will make a determination of value if you so wish. A few tips at a formal hearing. Always allow the appraisal district to go first. The reason being is because you'll hear what the appraisal district is saying, and then you are going to make your argument, and maybe some of your argument is going to be going against what the appraiser just said. The appraisal district will have a chance to respond to your argument afterwards, and then you'll get the final say. So it is always nice for the appraisal district to go first. And then at the end of y'all's presentation, the appraiser may offer you another value. So let's say I go to the value, let's say the proposed value is 350,000. I'm going to the appraisal review board at a formal hearing and my value is 250,000. And at the formal hearing, the district now wants to offer me 315,000, right? Yes, that's a decent reduction of 35,000, but you should never accept the offer that the district is providing at a formal hearing. The reason being, let the appraisal review board make a determination of value. Now their range of what they're going to tell the value is between my value of 250 and their 315. So sometimes they'll kind of go along in the middle there, hopefully. So never at a formal hearing accept the value that the district has, and because either A, the board member is going to agree with the district and just place the value what the appraiser says, and then secondly, you'll lose your right for the appeal after the appraisal review board. If you go to the formal hearing and you are not satisfied with the order, the final determination of value, you can ask for an arbitration or a judicial appeal. Again, that only applies if you do receive an A or B order. So even if you're at a formal hearing and you agree to it, what the district offers, you lose that right to appeal. My firm, and I don't suggest to go forward with an arbitration or judicial appeal. You can. Arbitration usually requires a deposit for the arbitrator. And if you do file a judicial appeal, you're going to be filing court fees, filing fee with the district court. If you were to ask me which one should I do, I would probably say go with the judicial appeal because you can always appeal the decision from the district clerk. You can't appeal a decision from an arbitrator. So those are kind of the steps. In my firm, we only handle the first two steps, the informal and the formal hearing. And then there are law firms that just handle the arbitration and the judicial appeal. They don't handle the informal and formal hearing. So if you have any questions about either one of those steps, please let us know in the chat. So my firm, what do I do? Again, I'm an attorney. I represent individuals at their property tax hearings, and I charge 35% of the estimated tax savings before exemptions. I do cap my fees. For homestead properties, the most I charge is $150. If you have an over 65 exemption, the most I charge is $65. And if you have a 100% disabled veteran and you're not paying anything in property taxes, I'll protest your property for free. But to give you an example of what my fee structure is, Matthew had a set tax rate of 2.9%. For my example, I'm going to say our tax rate is 2.5%. That means that every $10,000 we reduce in market value, you save $250, right? 10,000 times 2.5% is $250. Let's say I just do that. I just gave you $10,000 in reduced market value. You save $250. Our 35% fee would come out to $87.50. So it is based upon how successful we are at your protest hearing. But if you do have that homestead exemption, your fees are capped at $150. One more note about this: it is before exemptions, and it's important because, as I mentioned on that notice of appraised value, sometimes your market value, your appraised value is a lot higher than your assessed value. So when 2021 and 2022 boom happened in Bexar County and values went up 40, 50%, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I was going to these protest hearings, I was getting really large reductions because the values jumped up. So even I was getting 30% reductions, I was getting $150,000 to $200,000 reduction in market value, you were still paying less because you were capped at a lower amount. So the last thing I wanted to do was say, your client got you a $200,000 reduction. That's a $2,500 estimated tax savings before exemptions. My 35% fee is $800, $900. That just wasn't fair. It's not right. So we cap our fees to $150 for homestead properties because we know that sometimes the homestead exemption may be in place and you may be capped. The caps eventually get eaten up. We had that big boom the last couple of years. That 10% increase every year, it's not going to increase 10% every year. I've been told that this year's increase was about 2.4% from the previous year. So even if you're capped, let's say you still have a homestead cap, your market value only goes up 2.5%. Well, your assessed value is still going to go up 10% because it's going to continue to go up until it catches up to that market value. So you want to try to get it down as low as possible every single year. And if you do decide to protest yourself, you stick to the facts of your property. Don't get emotional. Don't try to bully the appraisal district saying, I'm a realtor, or I know I'm the president of the HOA. Stick to the facts. They're going to work with you as long as you are prepared, you have evidence, and you're respectful. Bexar County, I will say, is my favorite county to work in. I work in over 50 counties in Texas, and I think we're up to 65 counties this year. There's a few that I don't like working in, Atascosa, and sometimes, they're difficult, especially the smaller counties that they're just think that, they're they're on the pedestal. So, yeah, it's sometimes difficult, but so if you have property anywhere in Texas, I'd be happy to help you out. 80% of our properties are here in Bexar County and surrounding counties, Hays, Guadalupe, Comal, Travis County, all the way down to the valley to Hidalgo, all the way up to Lubbock County, and all the way to El Paso. So all throughout Texas, we can help you. In Bexar County alone, we had over 3,000 properties that we protested last year, over 1.1 billion in market value. So this is all we do right now. We just finished our last hearings for 2023 purposes in February. So I got a month off in March, but now we're ready to get back into it for this year. Last page is my contact information one more time. That's my cell phone. If you want to write that down, my website again, protesttax.com. If you have any direct questions, you can email us at info@protesttax.com.
You also do rental properties?
Rental properties, yes, every single property, and that's a good point. You can protest any property. It doesn't, not just your homestead. Any property that you're paying taxes on, yes, you can protest it. Rental properties, I am the vendor for the apartment association, so I have a lot of clients that have large portfolios of 20, 30 single family rental properties. And for those clients, and for if you have multiple properties, let me know. We can always get you a good deal.
How many comps should they send in when they're protesting if they're doing it on their own per property?
That's a good question. So when we make our, and that brings a good point, when we provide our evidence packet, we work with a third-party vendor called CMA Snap, and we plug in 5 comps, right? The district uses about 5 as well. But the good thing about us is we get to pick what comps we want to use. And the one thing that the comparables don't do, so let's say you are picking, 5 properties and you're writing a CMA for your clients.
We're not allowed to do that.
Oh,
We can only give them the information. We can't give them a CMA.
Okay, so you can't give them CMA. Okay, that's a good point. So what we do is we want to see the photos of your property so we can make condition adjustments, because the district will have their grid, but they don't make adjustments for the condition of the property. They're just comparing your property to what is sold against another property, and they're making the adjustments on the square footage, the lot size, the year build, the pool, whatever, but they're not actually making adjustments for the condition. So a good argument that you can make is, well, sometimes you'll have the actual MLS sale, it'll say newly remodeled, blah, 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 blah. Well, look at this newly remodeled home and look at, the pictures of my home. There should be a large condition adjustment. And on the CMAs that we provide, we make like a full or partial adjustment on the condition, which helps bring down the value that we put at the very top, hopefully get it lowered. So our evidence packet is pretty nice. Again, it's consisted of our CMAs that we provide, as well as the evidence that the property owner provides as well.
Do crime statistics help when you're fighting any battles?
That's a good question. We get asked that a lot. Yes and no. I would say more on the no side. No, because crime was there when you bought the property. Crime is not going to deter the sale of a property.
Sometimes there's a rash of burglaries that things increase.
You can always argue whatever you want, and maybe the appraiser will find that material. But we like to stick to what your property specifics are. So crime statistics, if you got a bullet hole through your window, that's a great piece of evidence. I'd like to present that. But I wouldn't suggest printing out a bunch of crime statistics or maps.
What about the areas where we have some school districts in town where schools are being shut down and they're reducing the elementary schools and stuff in the area, children are having to travel further?
I would say that would probably have a direct pack on the sales. And so maybe you would probably see that in the comparable sales. But as far as that argument goes, the Texas Comptroller is very specific about what they consider material, location, and I don't have the list in front of me, but anything like that, or anything you can imagine, it probably would make a decent argument, but as far as material facts go, the district isn't too concerned about that. From my experience, they don't really care.
What if the house was put on the market and it sat for 4 or 5 months and never sold?
Yeah, that's great. That is.
Finding more, man.
Yeah, actually, on my questionnaire, I have that as a line item. It says recently listed at X, but didn't sell. Absolutely. Because if your home was listed for sale for $450 for 9 months and the district has you at $450,000, well, that's a great argument to say, well, appraisal district, your market value for me is $450. It can't sell for $450. So I'm not saying to put your house on the market for $200,000 and don't sell it for a year for protest purposes, but you are correct to assume that that is great evidence.
Material evidence.
It is material evidence, yep.
What are your, if you had to name your top 5 material evidence things to focus on?
I mean, sales are number one. So if you have a recent purchase and the sales price is lower than what the proposed market value is, that's the most slam dunk case we have. It's easy to show them, hey, this is the recent sale of the property. You have it at $500,000. We just bought it for $400,000. The district is really good at monitoring the sales price. So sales data, especially if it's a recent sale, provide me the signed settlement statement. Make sure you provide the signed one. Sometimes the district will say, well, this one's not signed, and then I have to ask my property owner, do you have the signed one? It's just a little more hoops to jump through. Speaking on that, if you bought the property not through the MLS, a private sale, but maybe you still paid commissions, the district likes to see that. So it wasn't on the MLS, but you can show, look, there were commissions paid on the property. They'll consider that a market sale as well. HUD foreclosures, those are considered market sales as long as they were exposed to the market. So besides sales price, recent contracts, closing disclosures, photos, key, very key. Some districts are a little more pushback. Well, I want this a timestamp photo. So if you have one that's around the January 1st timeline, even better. Quotes for repairs. We do work with some contractors. If you need a contractor to go give you a quote, we can have our contractor go out to your property and give a quote for you. So the sales, photos, I'm trying to think of 2 more. I mean, personal information is great. Yeah, I think that the district really likes to see that the property owner took their time to provide photos, that they're really making an effort to, help the district help you.
And is there always a reduction just by doing the process?
Well, in Bexar County, we have a very good success rate. The only time we won't get a reduction if it's a recent sale and the sales price is higher than what the proposed market value is, right? So the district has you're proposing a value of $400,000 and they know you just bought it for $500,000. Why would they bring it any less than $400,000? But to answer your question, let's say it's not a recent market sale. I don't want to speak statistics off the top of my head. I don't know it, but I would say more than 95% of our properties, we get a reduction by showing up, and we have a really good relationship with the district. I worked with the same appraiser the last couple of years. Before that, I was working with the same appraiser for the last 4 or 5 years. So I'm able to call them up. We're able to get some good reductions for everyone.
With the new increase in homestead value, yes. Is that going to affect overall all of our other properties that are not our homestead? Do we feel like values are going to go up faster?
Well,
they're going to have to get the money somewhere.
Yeah, so that's a good question.
Money came from the state coffers, not from the county, so maybe not.
Maybe not.
It's a yin-yang effect, right? So the exemption amounts did increase for homestead properties. So instead of a $40,000 partial exemption, it's now $100,000. So hopefully you're paying less than you did in the previous year. And that's what we're seeing. Yeah, hopefully. The school district, we also voted to reduce the school district tax rate.
That's what we need.
Yeah, and so I will say there are websites where you can look to see when these open meetings are to discuss the tax rates for the city, for the school district. And I encourage you to attend these meetings and vote, for a lower rate if you can. Values are going to continue to go up. Tax rates are going down a little bit right now. Over the last couple of years, they've given us those tax breaks. I think we're going to see tax rates go up a little bit more while values continue to go up. And I will say there, besides the main two things it did was increase the homestead exemption amount. It also reduced the school district tax rate. It also limited the increase in non-homestead properties to 20% increase for the next 3 years. So 20% year over year. So if you have a non-homestead property, your own property, if it's less than $5 million, if it's less than $5 million, yeah, then you're going to be capped at a 20% increase in assessed value, at least for the next 3 years until another law gets passed and then they kick that can down the road. But there have been, as you've seen, a lot of recent legislature going towards property taxes because values have gone up like crazy and your values have directly impacted your property taxes and everyone's complaining. So, and all these politicians are trying to save face.
So while we're talking about saving money on property taxes, the other thing is the timeline of filing homestead.
Yeah, so I only do protests, but homestead exemptions are a big part of my world. I don't want to say I defer to the appraisal district, but I always defer to the appraisal district regarding any questions regarding homestead because the laws change all the time. But there is the deadline of April 30th to file a homestead. That doesn't mean if you miss the deadline, you can't file a homestead. It's just considered a late filing and it's not going to be applied until maybe the next year. But you can go back 2 years. So let's say you've lived in the home for the last 10 years and now you want to file a homestead right now. Please do. Near the top of the application, it will say, are you filing a late application? Yes. Years applying. Well, you're still made it in time for 2024. You can go back 2 years. So when your years applying, you put 2022, 2023, 2024. And when the tax assessor picks up on that, so you'll follow that with the appraisal district, but when the tax assessor's office picks up on that recent filing of a homestead application, and they see that there's a late application, they'll send you a check in the mail for your overpayment for the last 2 years. So that's how I get a lot of my property owners when I say, hey, is this your homestead property? Yes. Well, you've lived in it for 10 years. How come there's not a homestead? Oh, I thought I did it, whatever. Like, well, do you want to check in the mail for, a couple $1,000s, especially recently when values jumped up like crazy,
Right.
Because then it'll retroactively add that homestead cap in there as well, which is that 10% limit in increase in assessed value. So yes, April 30th is the deadline to file for a homestead exemption, but you can file it anytime during the year. Besides the homestead, the most common other exemption is the over 65 exemption. That can be, it usually gets applied because when you file for a homestead, you have to put your date of birth. And so the appraisal district will automatically pick it up. The year you turn 65, it should
We just don't want to count on them.
Yeah, well, and that's the other thing. It's the year you turn 65. So don't wait until you're 65 if your birthday is December 31st. You still get it for the entire year. So you're going to turn 65 that year. You can apply for the over 65 exemption at any point during that year, and it should be applied for the entire year.
We have a lot of military folks in San Antonio.
Yes.
So any special tips on those guys filing for their exemptions?
Yeah, so there are other exemptions on there. We can go through it's the same residential exemption application.
Will you flip back to that one?
So I don't think I have that form, but we can go, if you can go to bcad.org real quick, and we can just kind of search BCAD. It's the first form that pulls up .org. Perfect. So if you go to the Forms tab near the top.
Here, let me make sure I got it on the.
Okay, cool.
Doing it here.
There we go. Okay, so go to the Forms tab.
So just for everybody, this is bcad.org, Bear County Appraisal District, their homepage. We'll go somewhere else after this and see some other stuff too.
Yeah, so the first form that pulls up, if you click exemptions, is the 5114. It's the homestead exemption form. This is the form that we were just talking about. So as I mentioned, are you filing a late application? Yes, here's applying. Right now, if you're filing it for this first time, but you've lived in there for a while, you'll put 2022, 2023, 24. You only have to file it one time, and then it's on your property indefinitely, unless the district asks for you to verify that it's still current. So there are disabled veteran exemptions, and if you're 100% disabled, you pay no property taxes. Again, I encourage you to reach out to the appraisal district for any questions regarding exemptions. They have an entire team dedicated to answering your questions. But I know if you do apply for it, you have to show your disability amount. So sometimes if you're 70% disabled or 30% disabled, there's different levels. So you will be credited, even though if you're not 100% disabled, don't think that you can't get the exemption. You'll still apply for it, but you'll either get whatever percentage that you receive. Besides that, a couple more tips on here. If you and your spouse own the property, you're going to check the married couple box, and then you'll put what the property owner's name 1 and then property owner name 2. So you and your spouse's name will go here. Their date of birth will go here. Driver's license are here. And then under percent ownership, don't put 50% each. Y'all each own 100% of the property. If you put 50% each, the district is going to view y'all as tenants in common, which just kind of screws things up and isn't good. So you always want to put 100% if you have if you're married, and that to be accurate. The reason, and you also have to provide the copies of y'all's driver's license. So if both of y'all are on the deed, you are going to have to submit with this application copies of the driver's license that match the address that you live in. You'll fill out section 3 when you acquire the property. If we actually go back up real quick. So under this section right here, are you transferring an exemption from a previous residence? If you had a homestead at the previous house and then you're transferring it, you want to make sure you just check all that off. Besides that, pretty easy to fill out. It's very self-explanatory. Another common question we get about exemptions, we scroll down to section 4, I believe. Or section 3, property owner. If it's a manufactured home, that's only if it's a manufactured mobile home. So you will most likely leave that blank. You don't have to worry about that. Some people ask me, well, I got a Perry home. I don't know what the model is or whatever. Don't worry about that. And then if you have to provide a copy of your driver's license unless you're exempt, unless you're one of these exemptions, but most of the time. And if you're active U.S. duty U.S. Armed Services, you don't also have to provide documentation for your address. And a lot of the times their mailing address may be different than where they're currently living. And you'll sign that. The easiest way is to send that by email to the appraisal district. Their email is cs, as in customer service, cs@bcad.org. You'll get an automated reply saying they received it, and it usually takes a couple weeks to get it applied. One tip, if you can, go to the appraisal district in person, hand this into them, because they will add it right away and they'll give you a letter saying that it has been applied. So instead of sending it by email, hoping that they're eventually going to apply it, if you have the time, go in person and file that in person. Any other questions?
Yeah, you talked about that percentage ownership.
Yes.
It is put at 100%. Our house, of course, we've been there for like 18 years now.
Yeah.
I have no idea what I put there. Probably.
Oh, you're fine. Yeah.
No.
No, you probably put 100% each. The reason why.
Is there any way to check?
You have the HS, I've already checked.
Yeah.
You have the HS, which, no, so.
No, but that's the whole thing. 50% will also get you HS, right?
Yes, it will still show HS even if there's only 50%.
So you may not be getting the full benefit.
If you want, we can search your property real quick, or I can do it afterwards. Sure, what's the address?
13134. Run.
Put Spring, okay. Oh, right there. Okay, perfect. Okay, so you've got the HS, percent ownership, so it shows ownership 100%. If it was 2 different individuals, it would actually have owner 1 and then it would have owner 2 and it'd have 50-50. So because it has 100% right there.
Trust was done separately.
Yeah, and a trust can own a homestead. An LLC cannot own a homestead.
Yeah.
So if you want to put your property in an LLC, but you still want a homestead, it's not going to happen. If you have a trust, you can absolutely have a homestead.
That brings us to one of our other questions we had.
Okay.
That I think while we're here, we can kind of get to it. This one came through email from Audrey. She says, I've protested the past 3 years. The result is the same each year. They lower the value of my property, but my taxes are not lowered. I thought that your tax is a function of the value times the rate. I asked this and I was told no, but then I asked how I can get my taxes lower. And then I was told I should take that up with the legislature who establishes the rate. This doesn't make sense to me at all. Can you help me out?
Yeah.
So I did get her address, so I'll punch that in here.
She's over 65.
So, but
Yeah, so if your value goes down, but your taxes remain the same, then you probably have a tax ceiling. And a tax ceiling is for the properties that have an over 65 exemption. So if you scroll down, you'll see the exemptions. For confidentiality reasons, they can't put over 65, so they'll put other. So 99% of the time you see other, it means over 65. And what that does, if we click on taxing jurisdictions, so right here, you'll see if you have an over 65 exemption, you'll get this extra column that says tax ceiling. If you just have a homestead exemption, you're not going to see this column. But what a tax ceiling does is it limits the amount of taxes that you pay. It's the ceiling, it's the most you're going to be paying. And for an over 65 exemption, the amount of taxes that you pay that year is most likely the amount of taxes that you're going to have that tax ceiling at. So for Bexar County, your tax ceiling is $124, then that was probably established a while ago, right? Whatever year you turn 65. You can see what your taxes are with and without the exemption. So there are only two taxing entities that don't care about the over 65 exemption, which is the River Authority and the health system. So those two tax rates, they're pretty small. You can see the River Authority is 0.018% and the health system is 0.27. They don't care that you have an over 65 exemption. So your taxes may increase a little bit even if you have an over 65 exemption, but that's very nominally because of those smaller tax rates. But yeah, unless you get your appraised value below the value that was established for your tax ceiling, you're not going to get any further amount down. I will say you can toggle between the years to see what they were year over year. So this is 2023, 693. And if we scroll up, we can see what they paid in 2022. So in 2022, 514. So actually, the value jumped, their taxes went up by about $180. And that's because probably the increase in those two smaller rates. But let's actually go to let's go to roll value history. Let's tap down here. Okay, so their assessed value jumped up from 395 to 435. One more thing to look at if under improvements. So let's say you have the over 65 exemption in place, great. If you add any improvements to your property, let's say you add a pool, then those new improvements get added as new improvements. They don't get part of that tax ceiling. There are no improvements here. So my assumption why your taxes went up $150, your assessed value went up about $40,000. Normally that $40,000 increase would cause your taxes to go up over $1,000. But it went up $180, and that's usually the smaller amount due to the non-participating jurisdictions. But good question.
Yeah, a lot of in-depth stuff to dig through here on those.
Yeah. And yeah, any other questions through the chat or by email? If you have any questions, feel free to send us an email. Again, my info@protesttax.com. The deadline, hopefully this year, will be May 15th if the appraisal district can get those notices out before April 15th.
They were pretty late last year, so I have no idea.
Yeah, they came out April 3rd last year.
No, not this. Getting the last year's backlog completed.
Oh, yes,
Yes. Protest that finished almost end of January.
Yes, I was in hearings in February as well.
One of the reasons I thought they were going to be late this year is they sent a letter to pretty much everybody in Bexar County.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to see if there was a whole bunch of homesteads that needed to be applied.
Yeah.
A lot of people got letters in the mail, so they probably got an influx of homestead exemptions to put in before they sent out the bills.
Yeah, and that could be it. Bexar County is growing tremendously, so they're adding new accounts every year. I'm sure you probably know more than me how many new homes have been built in San Antonio in Bexar County. Every year they have a record number of protests that get filed, and so they are very, very busy. There was a new chief appraiser. You know Homestead?
He was
I do
double
know,
checking
I'm just making
100%.
sure.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be, I'd be the guy that didn't have it here and put together a meeting on it.
Yeah, no worries. And last thing I didn't mention, which I need to include in my slide, is my firm works with a nonprofit called My City is My Home. They're a local nonprofit, and we protest hundreds of properties pro bono. If you qualify for a free protest, you've got to meet certain requirements. Your property has to be below, I think, $200,000, and your median income has to be below, I think, $45,000. So. A lot of retired, and I know the value-wise, values are going up, so it is hard to get below $200,000. But if you're right at that line and you want to qualify for a free protest, by all means, we're happy to help. And again, that nonprofit is My City is My Home, and they're tremendous. If you sign up through My City is My Home, but you don't qualify for a free protest, don't worry, half of our fee gets donated to the nonprofit. And last year we donated over $25,000 to the nonprofit.
Very cool.
So,
Very cool.
Yeah.
Great information, Ryan.
You're welcome. I know it's a lot. So if you want a copy of the presentation, just let Matthew or I know. We can email it to you. If you're a realtor and you want to provide this information to your brokerage, I'm happy to speak. We've got a few more events coming up. If not, hopefully we can get your protest filed this year, either through my firm or through yourself. Just make sure you meet that deadline. Perfect. Cool. Well, thank you, Matthew, for having us.
Yeah.
And look for those notices.
What's that, Brittany?
Oh, this was fantastic. So much value. Thank you so much, Matthew and Ryan, for having this. Fantastic.
Welcome. Thanks for attending.
Of course.
Cool.
Probably from a baseball field.
Hopefully. Yeah.
Set in.
So do y'all protest your values?
Yes.
Yeah, every year?
Yep.
Yeah, do y'all have multiple properties or just one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Every single one and every year to get something on every single